Hello all, a very quick note before the video starts. I stupidly made a top 12 instead of a top 10 by accident because when I looked at my list of cards I saw that I had 10 creatures and assumed I was good to go. Didn't actually account for the 2 non-creatures that are in the list. So you're getting a top 12 instead of a top 10. Wanted to knock this video out for you all really quickly before Crimson Vow spoilers start, so hopefully you don't mind. With spoiler season just around the corner for Innistrad Crimson Vow, and it being imminent that we see the new deck lists for the Commander decks, I thought I'd go through a top 10 list of cards that I would like to see reprinted into Vampiric Bloodline. Number 12. First printed in Battle for Zendikar back in 2015, believe it or not, can't believe it was that long ago, Drana, Liberator of Malakir. If we can assume that the deck is black and red, I'm not sure if that's been confirmed yet, but I think it's a foregone conclusion. I don't think they'll splash white in there. If it is a black and red deck, then we can assume that it's aggro, and if it's an aggro list, then Drana goes really well with that. She hits with her first strike damage in the air, buffs the entire vampire army, and then they get hit with their plus counters on. Really solid inclusion, and is currently hovering at around the $5 mark, so it is slowly creeping back up in value, and it would be good to see a reprint of this before and if it goes over that $10 mark. Number 11. Then we go over to another legendary vampire. Not sure how many legendary vamps they'll want to put in the deck. They usually include multiple legendaries so that you can pick and choose the commanders that you want to build around, one of which could be your Henny Undying Partisan. This card also sits at around the $5 mark, and it's only ever been printed once in Aether Revolt, so minus a reprint it will keep on steadily increasing in value. Really good sack outlet that's difficult to remove. Buffs itself, so it could go as part of some kind of plus counter sub-theme, plus it adds haste, so goes well in a black and red aggro deck, assuming again that it is a black and red deck that we're going to get. Number 10. Another one that's only ever seen a printing once. This one sits at around $10 and it is from the Edgar Markov Commander set from 2017. This card annoyingly was never made available on Magic Online and still hasn't been made available to this day. So I personally would very much love to play with this one, and it's a really good include for the deck. Especially if you just decided to keep the artwork and the flavour text the same, Olivia being present on the artwork makes perfect sense to print into this precon. Number 9. Then a little bit more pie in the sky thinking is Bloodghast. I don't think that we're going to see a reprinting of Bloodghast in this precon, but we can hope, can't we? Sees a lot of play outside of vampire tribal lists. It's really good to slap a skull clamp onto and then use fetches and replay it over and over again. Has been reprinted a few times but doesn't ever seem to really go down in value, sits at around the $10 to $15 mark. And again, I would really love to see a reprinting of this, but I am not holding out much hope for this one. Number 8. A 2-mana vampire that we are much more likely to see reprinted is Cordial Vampire, only a few years old from the Modern Horizons set, but it's already crept its way up to the $7 mark and could easily go north of $10 and $15 over the course of a few years. I think it would be good to nip the price in the bud now and reprint it in this precon. Goes really well with the assumed Rakdos theme, because it is likely that we'll have lots of interaction and want to blow up a lot of creatures, get them out of the way and turn our vampires in sideways, and this will buff our army much like Drana does whenever it sees that happen. Number 7. Kalitas Traitor of Get next. Originally printed in 2016's Oath of the Gatewatch, you can pick this one up currently for around $15, and obviously we would like to see a reduction in that price if we can. What you typically want to do in tribal decks is have abilities and effects that would usually be on other creature types and instants and sorceries, enchantments, things like that, instead having those on your tribal creatures. So in this case Kalitas is obviously Graveyard Hate, and then the fact that you can make some bodies with it is just an added bonus. It is a sack outlet as well technically. I don't like having to pay for that sack outlet, but it is good to be able to double up on your sack outlets when you're in a pinch. Kalitas a worthy reprint target I think, and also somewhat goes with the whole plus counter sub-theme that Wizards seem to have been pushing in recent years. Also noteworthy that Kalitas Bloodchief of Get has only ever seen one printing from the original Zendikar set, and that sits at around $7 to $8 itself. I actually don't think much of this one, but it is worth noting that it might see a reprint in this set for the more casual fans. Depends how much power they want to shove into the precon, I suppose. Number 6. Now an absolute no-brainer for me with regards to flavour, much like New Blood. Once again making an appearance is Olivia Valdarin. She is from the original Innistrad block and can be had for around $13. She's just a huge flavour win. We assume that she's going to be a big part of the story as well. Not sure if we're going to get an Olivia in the standard set. We assume that we will. So not sure if Wizards are going to want to print a different copy of Olivia in the precon so as not to cause confusion to newer players. I'm not sure how much they consider things like that. But I think this Olivia Valdarin being reprinted, knocking down the price a little bit and getting a flavour win in there is a perfect include for Vampiric Bloodline. Number 5. And we're going back to a little bit of wishful thinking here. Sorin Imperious Bloodlord, printed only a short while ago in M20, has already got itself up to $25. If we get some more expensive vampires in this deck, which we assume we will, then this can cheat them out. Things like Haunt of Hightower and another vampire that we're going to mention a little bit later on will be great targets for this. I don't think there's all that much chance of this being reprinted. It only came out a couple of years ago and the price of it is at $25 like I said, so it might be too expensive to throw in a precon, because you throw cards in like this, it drives up the price of the whole precon, and Wizards do tend to stray away from doing that. I think they tend to want the precons to be available to as many people as possible, and also they'll save reprints like this to sell booster sets. So not all that hopeful that we'll be seeing Sorin, but it would be a really cool include to see. Number 4. And speaking of expensive includes, Bloodline Keeper, I didn't realise just how expensive this thing had become. It is now north of $20 if you want to pick one of these up. Really cool card for buffing up your army. Technically it does enable itself. I would only want to play it to enable the making of tokens with this. If it had haste, now there's every chance that you could have haste if it is in a black and red deck. And if this is the case, you can throw this out with 3 other vampires, tap this down for your 5th vampire and then transform it straight away. Minus that, I would wait until you have 4 vampires in play. Play this out for 5 mana, transform it straight away because this does count as your 5th vampire. And then you've got your entire vampire army buffed up. Excellent card. There aren't many places that we can see a reprint with this thing because the set that it gets reprinted into does need a vampire sub-theme. Would be cool to see this reprinted into Crimson Vow, the set proper, because then we could really drive the price of it down. But failing that, a printing into the pre-constructed deck might be almost as good. Number 3. Next up at number 3 is probably my favourite vampire ever printed. Captivating Vampire. I remember grabbing this in M11 as part of the precon. Used to get this in foil in that precon, it was the face card. And although this saw a reprinting a few years ago in the Edgar Markov precon, and in the list more recently, it still sat at around $13. We were just talking about having a few vampires in play. This is really good off the back of mass reanimation with something like Patriarch's Bidding as well. You are not affected by summoning sickness with Captivating Vampire. So if you've got 4 vamps in play, you play this down, gain control of another creature, and you've just gained yourself another vampire as well as probably the best creature on your opponent's side of the field. Number 2. Another one I'm not very hopeful for, but at number 2 it is Twilight Prophet. This is another one where I didn't have a clue that it had reached the price that it has. It's from Rivals of Ixalan back in 2018 and currently sits at a whopping $30. This is the most expensive card on the list and would be at the number 1 slot for that alone if it wasn't for the fact that I absolutely love the card that is printed at number 1. Twilight Prophet does everything that you want to do in vampires. It's an evasive creature, it drains your opponents, it gets you card advantage. It does a hell of a lot for only 4 mana, and as much as I hate to say it, it kinda does justify its own price. Sits in a lot of decks outside vampires, which is of course what drives its price up. The more vampire tribal cards don't tend to go up quite this high. This can sit in any black deck that wants to make a lot of permanents. It's very versatile in that regard. Once again, don't think that we're going to see a reprint into the precon with this because it might be at risk of driving the price of the precon up too far because people will buy it just for this card alone. But you never know, Wizards may surprise us. Number 1. And at the number 1 slot, knocking off Twilight Prophet, and I did say that that is simply for personal reasons that I love this card so much. Once again, another card that will do a hell of a lot for you. It is Patron of the Vein. This is an evasive creature that gets huge on its own +1/+1 counters, destroys a creature when it enters, so it's a great reanimation target. It buffs your entire vampire army, including itself, and whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, exile it instead. So it deals with a lot of the sack outlet and constant death and ETB loops that are in Commander, gets rid of a lot of those combos. Very, very versatile card, it does a lot. Worst case scenario, it just sits there as a flyer and gets really huge and whacks your opponents in the air, but it's likely going to do a lot more than that for you. At $16, this is yet another card that was only printed in the Edgar Markov list. We haven't seen a reprint of this one yet, and I think we're due for it. I think we've got a reasonable chance of seeing this one in the precon. It's not so ridiculously expensive that we can't shove it in there, and it's also one of those cards that you wouldn't really want to print outside of a vampire sub-theme thanks to the fact that it buffs vampires. I think Wizards needs to take the chance to reprint this one before it gets ridiculously expensive, and this is the perfect time to do it, I think. So there was what was supposed to be a top 10 ended up being a top 12. If you want me to do more videos like this and you want me to cover Spirit Squadron, which is also coming out with Crimson Vow, then be sure to leave it a thumbs up and share the video with all your friends. I do keep a close eye on the thumbs up and the views, so if you want to see more videos like this, you'll have to be sure to support the channel in that way. Another way to support me and the channel is through Patreon, which you can find with the link in the description below. That will get you perks such as being in the credits of the videos, and a big thank you to my patrons for continuing to support the eedi-H channel. I'm tribalkai on the eedi-H channel. Thank you for watching.